I suspect that my pregnant wife may have had an affair with her coworker. AITA for asking for a paternity test now? It started with a late-night call from her coworker, but it spiraled into something I never saw coming. Suspicion turned into heartbreak, and a paternity test confirmed my worst fears: our child wasn't mine. But that wasn't the end of the revelations. When my wife finally confessed what happened, it left me questioning everything about our marriage, our love, and the person I thought I knew. What do you do when betrayal comes wrapped in layers of lies? This is my story of trust, betrayal, and the painful choices we sometimes have to make to rebuild our lives. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be the guy posting here, but I need to get this off my chest. My wife, Rachel, 29, and I, 32, have been married for 4 years. I thought we were solid, great communication, lots of love, and a life we were building together. When she told me a few months ago that she was pregnant, I was over the moon. But lately, something feels off, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm missing something big. It started small. At first, Rachel seemed more tired than usual, which made sense. I know pregnancy takes a toll. But then, as the weeks passed, it wasn't just tiredness. She started getting distant. The kind of distance where you feel like you're having a conversation with a stranger in your own home. She spends a lot of time on her phone now, more than she ever used to. Before, we'd curl up on the couch after work and talk about our day. Now, she sits there texting, smiling at her screen, or worse, laughing at something I'm not a part of. I asked her once what was so funny. She just shrugged and said, "Oh, just Eric being Eric." Eric. Here's the thing about Eric, I've met the guy. He's one of her coworkers. Tall, smooth, and honestly, he has that annoyingly charming personality that makes you feel like he's running for class president, even in casual conversation. I met him a few times at her office parties, and while he seemed harmless, something about him rubbed me the wrong way. The way he'd lean in when talking to Rachel or the way she'd laugh a little too hard at his jokes, it just felt weird. At first, I thought it was just my own insecurities talking. But lately, Rachel's been mentioning him more and more. Eric is so funny, he had the whole office cracking up today. Eric helped me with the presentation, he's such a lifesaver. Eric says we should try that new Italian place downtown. It's always Eric. Last week, I noticed something that really shook me. Rachel got a phone call while we were watching TV. She answered it without hesitation, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. She left the room to take the call, and when she came back, her cheeks were flushed. I joked, "Who was that, your boyfriend?" She laughed awkwardly and said, "Don't be silly. That was just Eric." I didn't say anything else, but my mind has been racing ever since. I keep replaying little moments in my head. Like how she's been coming home later than usual, always blaming it on work. Or how she suddenly started putting more effort into her appearance on random weekdays, wearing makeup, doing her hair, even putting on perfume. I asked her once why she was dressing up, and she said, "Just because I feel like it." Maybe that's true, but it doesn't feel right. Am I reading too much into this? Is it just paranoia because things are changing with the pregnancy? I want to believe the woman I married is still the same person, but something is gnawing at me, telling me to dig deeper. I haven't confronted her yet because I don't have anything concrete, just gut feelings and a growing sense of unease. But part of me feels like if I don't say something soon, I'm going to explode. I don't want to be the guy who accuses his pregnant wife of something without proof. But at the same time, I can't ignore the way she lights up when she talks about Eric. It's a light I used to see when she looked at me. So, Reddit, am I overthinking this? Or is there something here that I need to address before it's too late? Hey Reddit, I'm back with another update because things have taken a turn, and I'm losing my grip on what to believe. If you read my last post, you know I've been feeling uneasy about my wife, Rachel, and her coworker, Eric. Something about their friendship doesn't sit right with me. Well, last night added a whole new layer to my suspicions. It was about 11:30 p.m., and we'd both gone to bed a little earlier than usual. Rachel had been exhausted all week, or at least that's what she told me. I was half asleep, drifting in and out, when I heard her phone buzzing on the nightstand. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was probably some junk notification or a random late-night text. But then it buzzed again. And again. I finally reached over to silence it, worried it might wake her up. When I glanced at the screen, my heart dropped. The caller ID flashed a single name, Eric. I froze, staring at the phone like it was a ticking time bomb. My brain was doing somersaults, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it's about work, I thought. But at almost midnight? What kind of coworker calls at that hour? I didn't answer it. I just let it buzz until it stopped. A minute later, there was another notification, a voicemail. I didn't have the nerve to check it. Instead, I put the phone back where it was and lay there, wide awake, my mind racing. When Rachel woke up in the morning, I tried to keep things casual. "Hey," I said over coffee, "Eric called you late last night. Did something happen at work?" Her reaction was immediate. She grabbed her phone like it was a lifeline, her face pale. "Oh," she stammered, avoiding eye contact. "He probably needed something for work. I'll check." She fumbled with her phone for a second before quickly changing the subject. I didn't press her on it, but her reaction stayed with me all day. It wasn't the reaction of someone who had nothing to hide. It was defensive, rushed, and felt like she was trying to cover something up. As if that wasn't bad enough, the rest of the week didn't do much to ease my mind. Rachel started coming home later than usual, always with an excuse about deadlines and last-minute meetings. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. She's always been hardworking, and her job can be demanding. But the timing felt too convenient. On Tuesday, she came home at 9:30 p.m., claiming she'd been working on a pitch with her team. When I asked who else stayed late, she rattled off a few names but mentioned Eric last, almost like an afterthought. On Thursday, she texted me in the afternoon saying, "Don't wait up for me tonight. We have a big presentation tomorrow, and I need to make sure everything's perfect." I didn't respond right away, but when she finally came home, she seemed different. She was quieter than usual, almost like she was preoccupied. I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Was everything okay at work?" "Yeah," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just stressful. You know how it is." "But I don't know how it is, Rachel. Because my job doesn't involve coworkers calling me in the middle of the night or mysterious late-night meetings. Reddit, I don't want to jump to conclusions. I really don't. But something about all of this doesn't feel right. The late-night call, her reaction, the sudden late hours, it's like puzzle pieces that don't quite fit but are starting to form a picture I don't want to see. Am I being paranoid? Or is this worth confronting her about? I don't want to come off as the overbearing husband who doesn't trust his wife, but at the same time, I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this than she's letting on. What would you do in my shoes? Hey Reddit, I'm back. If you've read my previous posts, you know I've been grappling with growing suspicions about my wife, Rachel, and her coworker, Eric. I told myself I was overthinking things, that I was being paranoid. But after what happened this past Friday night, I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. Rachel told me earlier in the week that she had a team dinner planned for Friday. It was to celebrate the completion of a big project at her office. At first, I didn't think much of it. Team dinners are normal, right? But the way she talked about it felt rehearsed. She was overly specific, saying they'd be going to this small Italian restaurant across town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. On Friday, I offered to drop her off. I figured it was a thoughtful gesture, it would save her the hassle of parking. But her response? "Oh, no need. I'll just take my car. I might leave early if I'm tired." That was my first red flag. Rachel loves when I drop her off anywhere, especially since it gives her a break from driving. So why the sudden insistence on taking her car? She left around 7 p.m., wearing a dress I hadn't seen in months and a perfume she usually reserves for special occasions. I asked her, half jokingly, "Is the dinner really that fancy?" She just smiled and said, "You never know who you might run into." The moment she walked out the door, my unease turned into something heavier. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who stalks his wife's every move, but something about her demeanor pushed me over the edge. I opened the location tracking app we'd both installed years ago. It was meant for emergencies, getting lost during hikes, checking in when traveling separately. I hadn't used it in years. Her location popped up instantly. I expected it to show her at the Italian restaurant she'd mentioned. Instead, it pinged at a swanky rooftop bar downtown. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Why would she lie about where she was going? I sat with that thought for an hour, my mind spinning with possibilities. I didn't confront her right away. I just waited, stewing in the growing tension. She came home around 11 p.m., looking slightly flushed. Not in the "I've been drinking" way, but in a "I've had a good time" way. She smelled of something that wasn't hers, or mine. A musky, expensive cologne that clung to her dress. "Did you have fun?" I asked casually, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh, it was great," she said, a little too cheerfully. "Just the team celebrating, you know." I nodded, not pushing it, but my stomach churned. Her tone was upbeat, but forced, like she was trying to sell a story she hadn't quite rehearsed. She didn't offer any more details, and I didn't ask. What could I say? That I'd tracked her and knew she wasn't where she said she'd be? I didn't want to tip my hand, not yet. The smell of that cologne stuck with me all night. It wasn't just unfamiliar, it was intrusive, like it didn't belong in our home. Lying awake next to her, I couldn't help but wonder who she was really with at that rooftop bar. Was it Eric? Someone else? Or am I spiraling over nothing? I feel like I'm on the edge of a cliff, Reddit, and I don't know whether to jump or walk away. Am I losing it? Or is this the moment I finally confront her? Hey Reddit, it's me again. I wish I were writing under better circumstances, but things have taken a turn I can't ignore. If you've followed my story so far, you know I've been suspicious of my wife, Rachel, and her coworker, Eric. I didn't want to believe there was anything going on, but the doubts wouldn't stop eating at me. Last week, I finally gave in and did something I never thought I'd do. I snooped through her phone. Let me set the scene. It was a quiet Thursday evening. Rachel had just finished dinner and mentioned she was going to take a shower before bed. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to scroll through my own phone, but my eyes kept darting to hers, lying face up on the coffee table. I don't know what came over me. I've always believed in respecting each other's privacy, but this time, my gut was screaming that I needed to know the truth. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed her phone and unlocked it. She doesn't change her passcode, and I wish I could say that made me feel secure, but clearly, it didn't. At first, I scrolled through her texts with other coworkers, looking for anything that might explain the late nights and suspicious behavior. Most of it was mundane, boring work stuff. Then I found the thread with Eric. My heart dropped as I opened it. The first message I saw was from Eric. "I love how you look when you smile. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow." My stomach twisted. The timestamp was from the day before her so-called team dinner at the rooftop bar. I scrolled up, and Rachel's response hit me like a brick. "You're such a bad influence, LOL." I kept scrolling, my hands shaking. Most of the messages were flirty, playful but undeniably inappropriate for someone who's married. But then I found something worse. Much worse. Eric had sent her a photo of a small gift bag. Inside was a baby rattle, and the caption read, "For our little secret." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. What did he mean by our little secret? Was he talking about the baby? Was he implying that the child Rachel was carrying might not be mine? I didn't know how long I sat there, just staring at the phone. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Was I jumping to conclusions? Was this all some inside joke I didn't understand? Or was this the confirmation I'd been dreading? Rachel came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, and I barely managed to put her phone back on the table before she noticed. I pretended to be engrossed in a sports highlight video, my heart pounding in my ears. She sat down next to me, completely oblivious, and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I said no, claiming I was too tired, and went to bed early. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Reddit, I don't even know what to do right now. Part of me wants to confront her immediately, but what if I'm wrong? What if I misinterpreted the texts? Another part of me wants to dig deeper before saying anything. I feel trapped in my own head, constantly replaying those messages. If Eric's talking about the baby, and if there's even a chance it isn't mine, I don't know how I'll handle it. What would you do in my situation? Should I confront her now, or should I wait until I have more concrete evidence? I feel like my entire life is hanging by a thread. Hey Reddit, I'm back. If you've been following my story, you know I've been wrestling with suspicions about my wife, Rachel, and her coworker, Eric. Last weekend was her company's holiday party, and what happened there has me questioning everything. I'm not even sure what's real anymore. Rachel invited me to the party last week, almost out of the blue. It caught me off guard because she hasn't exactly been trying to include me in her work life recently. Maybe she sensed my doubts and thought this would be a way to reassure me. Or maybe it was damage control. Either way, I agreed to go. The party was held at a fancy downtown venue, all decked out in Christmas lights and poinsettias. Rachel looked stunning in a red dress, her makeup flawless. I couldn't help but admire her as we walked in, but the tension between us was palpable. It didn't take long for me to spot Eric. He was in the middle of a group, laughing too loudly, his hand resting casually on a woman's shoulder. But the moment he saw Rachel, his face lit up. He excused himself and made a beeline toward us. "Rachel," he said, ignoring me entirely at first. He leaned in for a hug, his hand lingering on her back a second too long. "You look amazing tonight." She laughed, one of those light, flirty laughs that I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "Thanks, Eric. You clean up well too." I stood there, trying to keep my face neutral, but my stomach was churning. When he finally acknowledged me, it was with a quick nod and a handshake. "James, good to see you again," he said, his tone polite but dismissive. Throughout the evening, I couldn't take my eyes off them. Eric seemed to find any excuse to hover near Rachel. He touched her arm when he talked to her, leaned in too close when she laughed, and even whispered something in her ear that made her blush. I wanted to explode, but I held it together. I told myself I was imagining things, that this was all innocent. But then something happened that changed everything. Toward the end of the night, one of Rachel's coworkers, a guy I'd never met, stumbled over to me, clearly drunk. He slurred, "Hey, man. You're Rachel's husband, right? You're a cool dude, you know that? Not every guy would be so chill about, you know, her and Eric." I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The guy waved his hand vaguely. "Oh, you know. They're close. Like, really close. But it's probably nothing, right?" Then he laughed and stumbled off before I could press him further. My heart was pounding as I found Rachel and told her I wanted to leave. She looked surprised but didn't argue. The drive home was silent until I couldn't hold it in anymore. "What the hell was that about?" I asked, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "What was what about?" she replied, feigning innocence. "Your coworker," I said. "He said something about you and Eric being really close." "What's going on, Rachel?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, James. That guy is an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just drunk and running his mouth." "That didn't feel like nothing, Rachel," I said, my voice shaking. She sighed, exasperated. "Eric and I are friends. That's it. You're reading way too much into this. Her dismissive tone only made me feel worse. I wanted to believe her, but the night's events kept replaying in my mind: Eric's lingering touches, Rachel's laughter, the coworker's careless comment. Reddit, I don't know what to think anymore. Am I crazy for feeling like something's going on? Or is this the confirmation I've been dreading all along? Hey Reddit, it's me again. I didn't think things could get worse, but here I am. After months of suspicion, late-night phone calls, shady behavior, and a disaster of a holiday party, I finally confronted Rachel last night. What came out of that conversation has shaken me to my core, and now I'm questioning everything about my life. It started with me sitting at the dining table, staring at a printed copy of Rachel's text messages with Eric. I'd been holding on to them for days, trying to figure out the right time to bring it up. Last night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. She was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when I called her over. We need to talk, I said, my voice barely masking the anger and hurt I'd been carrying. She looked up, surprised, then wary. What about? I placed the printout on the table and slid it toward her. Her face went pale as she skimmed the messages, especially the one with Eric's photo of the baby rattle and the caption, "For our little secret." Do you want to explain this? I asked, my voice shaking. Rachel froze, her eyes wide. You went through my phone, she hissed, more outraged by the invasion of privacy than the content of the messages. You've been lying to me for months. I shot back. Your late nights, your team dinners, the way Eric can't seem to keep his hands off you, it all makes sense now. Is this baby even mine? That hit her like a slap. She stepped back, tears welling in her eyes. How can you even ask me that? She whispered, her voice trembling. Because I don't know who you are anymore, Rachel, I said, standing up. The woman I married wouldn't be sneaking around, wouldn't let some guy send her texts like that. So tell me the truth, is this baby mine? She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. It wasn't the guilty kind of cry I expected, it was messy, loud, and raw. Between sobs, she said, nothing ever happened. I swear, James, it never went that far. Then what the hell do you call this? I pointed at the printout. You expect me to believe that these texts mean nothing? That Eric sending a picture of a baby rattle with "our little secret" is just friendly banter? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. We got too close. I'm not proud of it, okay? I liked the attention. He made me feel special. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Special? I echoed. Was I not enough for you? It wasn't like that, she said, still crying. I never wanted to hurt you. I never slept with him, I promise. But we flirted. It was stupid, and I hate myself for it. I didn't believe her. Not fully. Not after everything I'd seen and heard. If you're telling the truth, then prove it, I said, my voice cold. We're getting a paternity test. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. You don't trust me at all, do you? How can I? I replied. You've lied about so much already. If this baby is mine, the test will prove it. And if it's not, I trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. She stared at me for what felt like an eternity, her face a mix of hurt, anger, and desperation. Finally, she nodded. Fine, she said quietly. If that's what it takes to fix this, then I'll do it. Reddit, I don't know what's going to happen next. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, and one way or another, my life is about to change forever. Am I wrong for demanding this? Or is this the only way to finally get the truth? Hey Reddit, I'm back. This might be the last time I write about this because, honestly, I don't even know how to process what's happened. The paternity test results came back, and my world, my entire life as I knew it, has crumbled. It took about 3 weeks to get the results. During that time, Rachel and I barely spoke. She avoided me when she could, retreating to the bedroom or spending hours out of the house, running errands. I spent most nights lying awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the future held. I wanted to prepare myself for anything, but nothing could have prepared me for what I learned. When the results came in, I opened the envelope alone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost ripped the paper in half. I read the words over and over, hoping they would somehow change, but they didn't. The test was conclusive, the baby wasn't mine. I sat there for a long time, unable to move, unable to breathe. Part of me had suspected this would be the outcome, but seeing it confirmed in black and white was something else entirely. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. When Rachel came home that evening, I confronted her. I held the results in my hand, and the look on my face must have said it all because she froze in the doorway. "It's not mine," I said, my voice flat and lifeless. "The baby isn't mine." Rachel's face crumpled, and she burst into tears. "James, please, let me explain," she sobbed, dropping her bag on the floor. "Explain?" I said, my voice rising. "Explain what, Rachel? That you've been lying to me for months? That this whole time, I've been planning for a child that isn't even mine?" She fell to her knees, her face buried in her hands. Between sobs, she said, "It wasn't Eric." That stopped me in my tracks. For a moment, I didn't understand what she meant. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. She looked up at me, her face red and streaked with tears. "The baby, it's not Eric's. It's someone else's." My head was spinning. "Who?" I shouted. "Who is it?" Her answer knocked the wind out of me. "It was someone, on a work trip in Vegas," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "A work trip?" She nodded, her tears falling harder now. "It was a stupid, drunken night. We were out with colleagues, and I drank too much. I don't even know his name, James. I don't even know who he was." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved and trusted. I didn't recognize her anymore. "You slept with a complete stranger," I said finally, my voice shaking. "And you didn't even have the decency to tell me? You've let me think this baby was mine, let me plan for a future with it, and all along, you knew there was a chance it wasn't mine?" "I was scared," she cried. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought maybe it would be yours, and we could just move on and forget about it." "Forget about it?" I repeated, my anger boiling over. "You've destroyed our marriage, Rachel. You've destroyed everything." She reached for me, but I stepped back. "I'm sorry, James," she whispered. "I made a terrible mistake, but I still love you. Please, we can fix this." "Reddit, I don't think there's anything left to fix. I feel like I've been living in a nightmare. The woman I married is gone, replaced by someone I don't recognize. How do you even begin to move on from something like this? How do you pick up the pieces of a life that's been completely shattered?" Hey Reddit, this will probably be my last update. The past few weeks have been a whirlwind of emotions, heartbreak, and decisions I never thought I'd have to make. I wanted to write this not for validation, but to finally get everything out and maybe help someone else going through something similar. After finding out the baby wasn't mine, and hearing Rachel admit to a drunken one-night stand with a stranger, I was done. I didn't explode or yell after her tearful confession. I just stood there, numb, as she begged for forgiveness. "I'll do anything to fix this, James," she sobbed, clutching my hands. "We can go to counseling. I'll quit my job, cut off contact with Eric, whatever you want. Please, don't throw this away." It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew right then that I couldn't stay. Her words, her tears, her promises, they felt hollow. The trust was gone, shattered into pieces I knew could never be put back together. "I need space," I said quietly, pulling my hands away. "I need to think." The look on her face was devastating. She nodded, probably thinking that this was just a temporary bump, that I'd come around once I cooled off. But in my heart, I knew there was no coming back from this. Over the next few days, I packed my belongings while she was at work. I didn't want another confrontation. I didn't want more tears, more apologies, more desperate attempts to fix something unfixable. By the time she came home one evening, my stuff was gone, and all that was left was a note. "Rachel, I can't do this anymore. I wish I could, but I can't. Please don't contact me. I'll have my lawyer reach out about the divorce. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment across town. It's nothing fancy, but it feels like mine, a clean slate." Rachel, of course, didn't respect my request for space. She bombarded me with texts and emails, pleading for another chance. She wrote long messages about our history, our love, and how she couldn't imagine life without me. I read the first few messages, but they all boiled down to the same thing: guilt and regret. I didn't respond. Eventually, I blocked her on everything. I filed for divorce last week. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also the most necessary. The thought of raising another man's child, a child she conceived through betrayal, was too much for me to bear. Now, sitting alone in my apartment, I've been reflecting on everything. It's surreal how quickly trust can be destroyed. One moment, you're building a life with someone, and the next, it's all gone. I keep replaying the last few months in my mind, wondering if I missed signs earlier, if I could have done something differently. But the truth is, this isn't my fault. Rachel made her choices, and those choices have consequences. Love isn't enough to undo the lies, the betrayal, or the pain. I've started to focus on myself again, working out, reconnecting with friends, diving into hobbies I'd neglected during the chaos. It's not easy, and some days are harder than others, but I know I made the right decision. If you're reading this and going through something similar, please remember, you don't have to stay in a situation that breaks you. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, and that's okay. Thanks for listening, Reddit. This chapter of my life is over, and while it's not the ending I wanted, it's the one I needed to move forward.